And welcome back to another edition of the Cougar Den. I'm the teacher, Mr. Pulley, and we're back, of course, with the class of 2020. Let me get that right before Jordan here gets me really good. 2020 in the Cougar Den, and we have a special guest today, a gentleman who's a longtime educator, and he has a terrific story to tell us about how he teaches his students, and then he's going to also give us some advice about English and how we study that and what he expects from his students as well. So joining us from the student panel today is our senior from the class of 2020. That's no other than the one and only Mr. Jordan Parker. Jordan, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Pulley.
All right, glad to be here with you. And today our special guest is Dr. Chris Martins from Carnahan High School of the Future, English teacher. Dr. Martins, thanks for being with us on the show today.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
All right, so we'll get things started, and we know that you have a long history in education and teaching and even starting school, so tell us about how'd you get started in education?
Like most of my stories, it'd be a long story, but I was store manager, shift manager at Little Caesars when I was in college. I went to school to be in engineering, and I wasn't enjoying it all that much. And one of the things that started happening, I had a student that was taking a math class, and she would come in early to work on some of her work, and started asking me for help on some of it. And then another employee was in the same class, and she caught us, me teaching some of the stuff. She asked if she could come in early too. So then it started being like every Tuesday and Thursday.
Yeah,
I was literally like erasing the dry erase board where we wrote all the dough prep amounts and giving algebra lessons there at work. And just, one day, one of them just said, "Why aren't you a teacher?" So I changed my major. I decided I was going to teach math. And then I wasn't too far into that before I decided that teaching math would be a pretty pathetic existence. So I decided I was going to teach English. So it came more from finding out that it was something I was good at than anything else. Yeah.
That's a great story. Jordan, I know you have a question for Dr. Martins.
Yeah. So Dr. Martins, so since it's been your second year at Carnahan, how do you like being with the Carnahan family?
I like being with the Carnahan family. I don't want to say students are students, but everywhere I've always kind of found a way to connect. I will say that I felt like at Carnahan, maybe even compared to other settings, students were pretty receptive and welcoming to me really early. And so I love that part. I have a great relationship with Principal Griffin. I have a great relationship with the AIC, Mr. O'Donnell. And I've got some other staff members that I'm pretty close to. So that stuff happened really quick. And I'm glad for it, yeah.
And I understand you teach English, so everybody has their own method. What is your method for teaching English?
Method? Well, I think the way I teach is more about what I try to avoid. I try to avoid being the one with the answer, because I really want students to value their own opinions. I really, when it comes to writing, I really try to avoid teaching a formula. I want students to take risks. My hope is I'm doing more in regards to critical thinking skills than I am actually teaching what happened in a book. And so I think that if I continue to hold myself accountable to what are the critical thinking skills that are involved in this, instead of what's the information they need to know, then I give students stuff that's of value later on. So.
It's great to talk to you, being a literary English teacher, to get on this topic with you. But how do some teachers, students might wonder about this? What are the things you do to encourage the writing, or is it as simple as the topics, the subjects you're having to write on? How do you approach that?
Well, it's a little bit different for different classes. The first thing I try to do is provide choice. So that frustrates some students, but most of my writing assignments are fairly broad. Even if we're going to write an essay about a large text that we've read, I give students options so that they can choose which one of those. In terms of smaller writing tasks, I really emphasize reflective writing. So I really try to, again, back to what we avoid, I don't want people writing papers where they just repeat back to me the information that I've given them.
Gotcha.
So if I think that students can write better if what they're writing about they care about. So that's the idea.
Jordan, another question for Dr. Martins?
Yeah, so Dr. Martins, when it comes to the reading, what type of books you prefer for your students to read?
Well, I mean, I say the first thing is that criteria is probably about third on the list in terms of how you end up selecting a text. I mean, the first one is, do we have it, or can I get it, right? So there's several books that we're reading in our class, for instance, that I'm going to have to buy. So I'll do that on a couple if I'm passionate enough about teaching it, but I can't buy 30 copies of 8 different books, right? So. But then I want the arguments and the discussions to be difficult and not so one-sided. I don't like teaching books. I'll bring up an example. Everybody hates this, but I bring up To Kill a Mockingbird. To Kill a Mockingbird gets taught all the time. But what's the concept? Is racism bad? We all come to a pretty quick decision on that one. There's nothing to discuss. So I like things that are confusing. I like things that aren't all that straightforward. I like things that create a space for people to disagree.
You know, I happen to just watch you, and I'm so impressed with you watching you teach and the way you interact with the students. You said it best. You have a tremendous relationship with these students. Jordan, one of your very own, Taina, Sean, our whole crew here, Rashad, Emily, Justin. I can go right down the line.
Yeah.
You have a great relationship with all of these students. And I noticed that you take it upon yourself to really help them think about life after high school, so to speak, and especially I've seen you work with them on preparing them for college, a particular college, what colleges would best suit them. I've seen you work with the athletes. I know you have 2 sons who are student athletes, college athletes, and so you've worked with students at Carnahan on preparing for the NCAA and all that. So what is it about that makes you really focus so much on their futures? I think it's great what you do with them.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of times. So I grew up pretty poor, and I grew up in a poor area, and I went to school with other poor kids, and that kind of thing creates a situation where the goals and the idea of what's next is very short-sighted, right? How am I getting through today? How am I getting through tomorrow? How do we get through next week? Even at the family level, right? So how do we stretch this money and make sure that we have this stuff for 2 weeks from now? And there isn't a lot of conversation in those communities about 5 years, 10 years, future, that sort of thing. And but in my life, I had my grandmother, and I would say that most of her conversation, it wasn't if, it was when, right?
Okay.
So when you're married and you have kids, you're going to want to do this. When you go to college, you're going to do this. When you're, and it was, as I watched other people around me, I realized how much of a difference that expectation made in my life. So I think that's the first part of it. I think that you provide hope to people by talking to them about what their future is going to be. But I also think that then when they think that far out, they can make short-term decisions that lead them towards that stuff. So I'm really passionate about that part. I also, you mentioned the sports stuff, and even the college search. I think, especially students whose parents did not go and play sports or whose parents did not go on to college, end up being at such a disadvantage because it's such a game.
Yes, sir.
It's such a racket. To how they keep it all secret. They really do, as to how the system works.
And you've been through it with 2 sons.
And I've been through those systems, both with the sports and with the college. And there's such a just sort of a secret coded path, And so I try to help kids navigate those things and see if they can catch up to some of those advantages. Right.
That's a great point. There are so many things, and if parents or anybody, haven't been, had an opportunity to be exposed to that, it can really, it can turn you in a lot of directions. That's an excellent point there, Dr. Martins. Final question, Jordan, for Dr. Martins.
If there's a advice you would give to all your kids, what that advice would be?
Follow passions. Cheesy thing, people say it all the time, but I think more and more we're creating this script that says, here's all the research, here's the job that you can get that'll pay the most money, here's the one that's going to be hiring more in 8 years, here's all this stuff, here's where all the high need is. And people that find themselves in jobs and in careers that they get paid well at but don't actually enjoy they don't have as good a life as I do. I know that. And so I think that putting the energy into the things that you care about can take you a very long way.
All right, well, Jordan gave you a great question for the students. I'll wrap up my final one with one for teachers that might be watching, and maybe your thoughts or some insight you can give on those, maybe thinking about a career in teaching and why you teach.
Oh, advice for new teachers. I mean, part of it is it's two-handed. Take it all very seriously. You have to be intentional about everything that you do, and then at the exact same time, don't take it so seriously. I don't know how to explain it any other way. It's hopefully you're putting your heart into it, but you also have to make sure that you protect yourself from the frustration and the anger and the disappointment that comes when you have 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. Hopefully you find yourself in a spot where you currently want it more than they do, right?
Right.
But that can't be a reason to give up on them or be frustrated. So I don't know. That doesn't really sound like advice, but.
That was good. Good thoughts.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Martins, we want to thank you so much for taking out time to come on to Cougar Den with your students and give them some thoughts, some more into who the man Dr. Chris Martins is. We appreciate that.
All right, thanks for having me.
Look forward to you coming back again, too. All right. That's Dr. Chris Martins on the Cougar Den. Jordan Parker, our senior from the class of 2020, Carnahan High School of the Future. And we will talk to you next time on the Carnahan High School Cougar Den right here on SLPS TV.